Hello, this is Mrs. Boots, and we're going to do our practice problems for simplifying rational expressions. Remember, there are 3 steps: factor, cancel, and write what's left. Let's look at example or problem 1. First thing, we have 2 quadratics, one in the numerator, one in the denominator. Both can be factored. So I factor the numerator. I need 2 numbers that multiply to give me 9 and add to give me 6. That's 3 and 3. Remember, they get the same sign as the middle term. Now for the denominator. This is perfect squares. So I have the square root of 9. That's easy. It's 3. So I have the plus 3 and the minus 3. Now cancel. Remember, you only cancel if it's the exact same top and bottom. So our simplification would be x plus 3 over x minus 3. Number 2, I have a monomial on top and a monomial on the bottom. Monomials cannot be factored, so we can go straight to canceling. Remember, you want each thing independent. Coefficients are one thing. So what can I divide both 14 and 35 by? That's right, we can divide by 7. So on top I would have a 2, on the bottom we would have a 5. That would give us the 2 and the 5. Now let's look at A. I have 3 on top, 1 on the bottom. That gives me 2 left over on the top. B. I have 1 on top, 5 in the bottom. So that gives me 4. 5 minus 1 is 4. And last but not least, C. 4 on top, 1 on the bottom. So I have C cubed in the numerator. Number 3. I have a monomial over a monomial. Monomials are not factored. We just look at each thing and cancel. 24 divided by 8. Well, 24 is divisible by 8 3 times. So I have a 3 in the numerator. Now my x's. I have 2 on top, 5 in the bottom. 5 minus 2 is 3, so I have an x cubed in the denominator. Now the y's. Y cubed on top, y to the first in the bottom. 3 minus 1 is 2. So I have 3y squared divided by x squared. Number 4. Again, a monomial over a monomial. I cannot factor monomials, so I look at each thing. I have a to the first and a to the first. Those cancel. Then I have x squared and x squared. Those cancel. Y and z are different variables, so those will not simplify or reduce. So my answer is just y divided by z. Number 5. These aren't monomials. The cool part is they're already factored for us. So I'm just going to look for what cancels. I have an x plus 1 and an x plus 1. One's on top, one's on bottom. Remember, they have to be on opposite sides of the fraction. So now I write what's left. I have a 2 in the numerator and an x plus 3 in the denominator. That does not simplify any further. Example 6, or number 6. Okay, now I have 2 quadratics. I have to factor both of them. The numerator is perfect squares. So, what is the square root of 4? That's 2. So I have an x plus 2 and an x minus 2. Remember, the signs have to be opposite in order for the middle term to be 0. Now factor the denominator. These are both simple factors because the coefficient of x squared is a 1. So I just look at what multiplies to give me the constant. 8. That would be 4 times 2. Because we're adding, both of them have a plus sign. Now let's see what's going to cancel. Well, I have an x plus 2 and an x plus 2. Remember, now you're going to write what's left. So I have an x minus 2 in the numerator and an x plus 4 in the denominator. Number 7. A quadratic over a quadratic. so I need to factor both of them. The numerator. What two numbers multiply to give me 24? And that 24 is negative. So that means I'm going to subtract to get the middle term, which is 5. Well, 8 and 3 multiplies to give me 24. The 8 will be negative because it gets the same sign as the middle. In order to give us a negative 5, the big number has to have the same sign. The 3 will be positive. Now let's look at the denominator. Two numbers that multiply to give me 30. 3 times 10. The 10 is negative because the bigger number gets the same sign as the middle, and the 3 is positive. Now let's cancel. X plus 3's cancel, and I'm left with the x minus 8 and the x minus 10. X minus 8 is in the numerator, and x minus 10 is in the denominator. You cannot cancel the x's out. Remember that this negative sign, the minus sign, or a plus sign in there clearly join these two terms together. So the x and the 8 is like a happy couple holding hands. We don't want to break up the happy couple. Number 8. I have a monomial, no, it's a binomial on top, but the power is 1. So we can't factor it any further. It's going to stay the way it is. In the denominator, I have a quadratic, so we need to factor it. X's are in front. What multiplies to give me 8? 4 and 2. Both of them are positive because the 6 is positive in the middle. Now which terms cancel? X plus 2 and x plus 2 cancel out. What's going to be left in the numerator? 1. Anytime everything cancels out, you're always left with a 1. We have an x plus 4 in the denominator. Number 9. I have two quadratics. Both have to be factored. The one on top is perfect squares. What's the square root of 49? 7. So I have a plus 7 and a minus 7. Now the denominator. What two numbers multiply to give me 28? That's right, 4 times 7. Both of them are going to be negative because we add them together and the sign of the middle term is negative. Now what's going to cancel? The factors of x minus 7, top and bottom. Let's write down what's left. On top, in the numerator, I have x plus 7. In the denominator, I have x minus 4. Number 10. I have a quadratic over a quadratic. The top one looks really odd because of that 51. So I'm going to start by factoring the denominator. It's perfect squares. So I have x's in front. Square root of 9 is 3. So I have a plus 3 and a minus 3. Now you know the teacher loves you. So the teacher is going to make sure that 51 is divisible by 3. You just have to figure out the sign. That gives you a hint because you know one of those is going to cancel. So 3 times what gives us 51? That's 17. Now the 51 is negative, so we're subtracting to get our middle term. And the middle term's negative. So the bigger of the two numbers, or the bigger of the two factors, gets a negative sign. Now let's cancel. X plus 3's cancel. Those factors are the same, top and bottom. Now write what's left. X minus 17 divided by x minus 3. This is the simplified rational expression. Number 11. I have an x squared on top, so I think I should be able to factor, but there's no third term. So let's look for a GCF, greatest common factor. What can we pull out of both x squared and negative 2x? Just an x. What are we left with? X minus 2. Well, that doesn't match anything in the denominator, and the denominator has an exponent of 1. But notice I have a 4 as a coefficient and an 8 as a constant. both of those are divisible by 4. So let's pull out a GCF. X minus 2. Bingo! Got it. So the x minus 2's are going to cancel. What are we left with? An x on top and a 4 on the bottom. X divided by 4. That looks a lot simpler. Number 12. I have a quadratic on top and a quadratic on the bottom. That means we need to factor. So on top, what two numbers multiply to give me 20 and subtract to give me 1? Yes, there's a 1 in front of that x. Okay, that would be 5 and 4, right? So what is the sign? 5 should have the negative because it's bigger and it has the same sign as the middle. 4 is going to have the positive. Now let's factor the denominator. I need two numbers that multiply to give me 15 and subtract to give me 2. Well, 15's easy. That's 3 times 5. Which one's going to be negative? Middle term is negative. 5 is negative because it's bigger. Now what cancels? X minus 5's cancel. What's left? An x plus 4 and an x plus 3. So my simplified answer is x plus 4 divided by x plus 3. Number 13. Okay, quadratics. That means we have to factor. So I have x's in front. In the numerator, what multiplies to give me 6 and adds to give me 5. That's 3 times 2. Both positive because the 5 is positive. The denominator, however, looks a little tricky. We have that 3 in front. But hold on, 12 is divided by 3. So let's do that. When I divide both terms by 3 and pull out the GCF, I get x squared minus 4. But coolness of coolness, isn't x squared minus 4 perfect squares? Yes. So let's go ahead and factor that out. We have x's in front, and the square root of 4 is 2. So I have a minus 2 and a plus 2. Okay, so what's going to cancel? X plus 2's cancel. Okay, what's left? X plus 3 and 3 times x minus 2. Two very different things. So I have x plus 3 divided by 3 times x minus 2. The 3's do not cancel. One's being added and one's being multiplied. Number 14. Well, on top I have a binomial, but it's an exponent of 1. There's no GCF, so there's nothing to factor. In the denominator, however, I've got cubes. That's crazy hard. Well, not really, because we can use the SOAP method to factor it. Remember, this would be A is x, and B would be what? What cubed gives me 27? Oh yeah, it's 3. So I'm going to have an x with the same sign, minus 3. Then I have x squared, opposite sign, plus a times b, that would be 3x, always positive, b squared. That's 9. Easy enough. Now what cancels? Well, the x minus 3's cancel. So what's left? 1 is on top because there's nothing there. Then I have x squared plus 3x plus 9 in the denominator. Now some people get creative and they try and factor that quadratic further. I'm here to tell you, remember that this quadratic from the perfect cubes is not factorable. You don't need to keep factoring it because it's not going to be factorable. In fact, we have to use the quadratic formula anytime we want to solve that for anything. Okay? Number 15. No, we did it again. There's that cube. Well, you know what one of the factors is going to be because it's right on top. Let's factor that perfect cube. A is going to be x. And B is going to be 1. So I would have x plus 1, remember same sign, x squared minus, because I have to do opposite sign, a times b, which is just x, Always positive b squared. Just a 1. And I know you already knew what was going to cancel is the x plus 1's. So now we write what's left. 1 divided by x squared minus x plus 1. Number 16. Now we're just plain evil. We have a square and a cube in the same problem. Let's do the square first. X squared and 16 are both perfect squares. So I'm going to have an x at the front. And what's the square root of 16? 4. So I'm going to have a plus 4 and a minus 4. Okay, so now let's look at our cube. A is going to be x. B is going to be what? What cube gives me 64? That's right, it's 4. So now, let's write it out. The binomial, x, same sign, minus 4. X squared, opposite sign, a times b, so it's just 4x. Always positive, 4 squared, 16. What's going to cancel? The x minus 4's. So what's left? That huge trinomial, x squared plus 4x plus 16 divided by x plus 4. Nothing else is going to cancel. That's our simplified rational expression. And this concludes all the practice problems for this lesson.